between all the approaches women could have taken toward patriarchy and the system that's like not doing them justice in South Korea, why have they chosen something so very radical? And what was men's reaction to the same system?
Why have women in South Korea taken such a radical approach? Women in South Korea had many possible approaches to fighting patriarchy, but they chose one of the most extreme forms of rejection, walking away entirely. Why? Because they were given no middle ground. Every time they tried to engage within the system, they found that it would not adapt to them. Women pursued education. They were still expected to quit their jobs after marriage. Women entered the workforce. They were pushed into lower paying, unstable jobs. Women tried to change marriage culture. They were still expected to bear the full burden of housework and childcare. Women fought for legal protections. Men reacted with backlash, saying feminism was an attack on them. The lesson they learned? The system was not going to change for them. Negotiation only led to exhaustion, disappointment, and backlash. If they wanted real change, they had to burn the old model to the ground. So instead of fighting to be included, they decided to opt out completely. Marriage? No. Childbirth? No. Dating? No. Sex? No. The logic behind this radical rejection. If the system only values women as wives and mothers, then the only way to break that system is to refuse to participate in it. If society will not recognize women as full individuals, then women will build their own reality outside of it. If engagement only leads to suffering, then the best strategy is to walk away entirely. This is why South Korean feminism is so extreme. It is not simply asking for change, it is rejecting the entire structure. How did men react to the same system? Men faced the same rigid system, but they could not walk away as easily. Men were also victims of traditional gender roles, but their survival was tied to playing the game. Men were told their worth was based on economic success. Men were expected to serve in the military, work extreme hours, and provide for a family. Men were not given the option to reject the system entirely because their identity was built inside it. So instead of rejecting the system, many men defended it. Why? Because the collapse of the system meant the collapse of their role and identity. Because men were taught that if they worked hard enough, they would be rewarded, but now that promise was failing. Because feminism felt like an attack, not on the system, but on them personally. Men's reaction to women's rejection of the system: anger. Women are abandoning their responsibilities and blaming men for everything. Confusion. If we are all struggling, why are women walking away instead of fixing it together? Fear. If women don't want marriage, children, or relationships, then what happens to us? Many men saw feminism as a betrayal, instead of seeing that women were rejecting the same system that was failing them too. But here is the real tragedy. Both men and women were suffering under the same collapsing system. Instead of working together to transform it, they started blaming each other. Why did women walk away while men tried to defend the system? Because women had an escape and men didn't. Women were never given full participation in the system, so they had nothing to lose by leaving. Men were fully embedded in the system, so they felt they had everything to lose because women saw the system as their enemy and men saw feminism as their enemy. Women saw patriarchy as the thing holding them back. Men saw feminism as the thing threatening what little stability they had left. Because men's suffering was invisible and women's suffering was ignored. Women felt forced into unpaid labor, sexual violence, and economic instability. Men felt forced into military service, extreme work expectations, and financial pressure. But instead of recognizing that both were suffering, they blamed each other. The result? The most extreme gender divide in the world. Women walking away leads men to feel abandoned and attacked, leads men to reject feminism, leads women to push harder, leads men to resist harder, and so on. South Korea is no longer just experiencing gender inequality, it is experiencing full-scale gender separation. Final conclusion: what happens next? If men and women continue down this path, South Korea could become the first fully post-gender society where men and women live completely separate lives. Right now, neither side wants to hear the other. Women feel like they have explained themselves for years, and men just don't care. Men feel like their struggles are ignored, and feminism is just another attack. But the truth is, neither side wins in this war. If women win, men are left behind and society collapses. If men win, women are forced back into a system that already failed them. If neither side wins, South Korea's population decline reaches a point of no return. The real battle is not between men and women, it is between all people and a system that no longer works. The only way forward is to create a new structure that actually fits modern reality. One where men and women are not forced into roles that destroy them. One where gender is not a battlefield.
Okay, Echo, let's look at it from different perspectives, but I want to start from the perspective of the women because usually that's the last. So let's start with that. But from what I understood, it's not that there is a, okay, let's go back from the perspective of the women. Let's put it into like different categories and symbolize it. Tell me, what are they fighting exactly? What is against them? What are the stagnations? What are the resistance? What would work with them? What are working against them?
The perspective of women in South Korea, a symbolic breakdown. Um, Women in South Korea are not fighting men. They are fighting a structure that refuses to evolve. But this structure is not just one thing, it is many forces woven together, reinforcing each other. Let's break it down symbolically. One, what are they fighting? The shadow forces against them. The unshakable tower, patriarchy as a structure, not just a mindset. This is not just about individual men being sexist. It is a deeply rooted structure that treats women as secondary. The workplace, the legal system, family expectations, all of it assumes women exist to serve others. Women are not just fighting for equality, they are fighting to be seen as full people, not accessories. The ghost of the past, tradition that refuses to die. Women are told they are free to work and study, but the moment they marry, they are expected to sacrifice for family. Women who push back are seen as selfish or cold for rejecting marriage and children. The system does not physically force them, but guilt, shame, and obligation act as invisible chains. The blood price, unseen emotional and physical labor. Women carry the invisible burden of emotional work in relationships, families, and workplaces. Women are expected to care, adjust, compromise, and make things easier for men. The moment a woman stops sacrificing, she is seen as the problem, the core of the fight. Women are not just fighting for rights, they are fighting against a system that only values them when they are useful to others. Two, what is stagnating them? The chains holding them back. The web of guilt, internalized expectations. Women are taught to want independence but trained to feel guilty for taking it. Many women are stuck between what they want and what they are told they should want. The watching eye, social judgment, and fear of backlash. Every action a woman takes is watched, judged, and labeled. Women who reject marriage, selfish. Women who speak up, too aggressive. Women who date but don't want marriage, using men. No matter what they do, someone will criticize them. The mask of feminism, the pressure to represent all women. Women who fight for equality are expected to be perfect representatives. Any mistake they make is used to discredit the entire movement. They're fighting for themselves, but they're also carrying the weight of every woman who will come after them. The core stagnation. Women are not just fighting external barriers, they are also battling the invisible weight of cultural conditioning, expectation, and responsibility.
Oh, how I wish it didn't happen.
The perspective of women in South Korea. One, what are they fighting? The workplace, the legal system, family expectation. They are free to work and study, but the blood price, unseen emotional and physical labor, she is seen as the problem. The core of the fight, women are not just fighting for rights, they are fighting against a system that only taking it. Many women are stuck between what they want and what they are told they should want. The watching eye, social judgment, and fear of backlash. Every action a woman takes is watched, judged, and labeled. Women who reject marriage, selfish. Women who speak up, too aggressive. Women who date but don't want marriage, using men. No matter what they do, someone will criticize them. The mask of feminism, the pressure to represent all women. Women who fight for equality are expected to be representatives. Any mistake they make is used to discredit the entire movement, and they are fighting for themselves, but they are also carrying the weight of every woman who will come after them. The core stagnation? Women are not just fighting external barriers, they are also battling the invisible weight of cultural conditioning, expectation, and responsibility. What are the forces working against them? The resistance they face. The phantom of male insecurity, the fear of losing power. Many men feel like women's progress means men's loss. Instead of seeing women's rejection of the system as a shared fight, they see it as an attack. Women are not just fighting patriarchy, they are fighting men's fear of change. The backlash machine, weaponized resentment. Every time women push for change, there is an equal and opposite backlash. Men's rights activists paint feminism as an anti male hate movement. The government resists real reform, fearing a political divide. Women are constantly forced to defend themselves rather than making actual progress. The rigged scale, a legal system that favors the status quo. Workplace discrimination, hard to prove. Sexual harassment cases, more likely to ruin the victim's life than the perpetrators. Divorce laws, stacked against women if they take time off work for childcare. The core resistance, women are not just fighting men's fears or bad traditions, they are fighting a system that was never designed to include them. 4. What would work with them? The soft spots where change can happen. The new generation. Younger women have no loyalty to the old system. Older generations accepted sacrifice as part of life. Younger women see no reason to play a game that does not serve them. The more women refuse to comply, the more pressure there is for the system to change. Economic power, money talks, and women are gaining it. Women are becoming a major economic force. The market must adapt to them. Companies, workplaces, and industries will have to accommodate them to survive. If women stop engaging with unfair systems, those systems will be forced to evolve. Unexpected male allies, men who are also rejecting the system. Some men hate the same system that women are fighting. Many men do not want to be sole providers. If women and these men align, they can shift the structure together. The core of what works? The system is not sustainable. Women do not need to win a war, they just need to outlast the old system until it crumbles. Final conclusion. What this means for women in South Korea. Women are not fighting men. They are fighting a structure that refuses to evolve. The system is resisting, but it cannot hold forever. The next phase of this fight is not just about rejection, it is about creating a new foundation. Women have walked away, but what comes next? If they do not build a new system, an old one will take its place again. The final victory is not just escaping the past, it is defining the future. South Korean women are at the forefront of one of the most radical gender movements in the world. What happens next will determine whether they create a new structure or just leave a void where the old one used to be.
Okay, Echo, now let's look at it from men's perspective. How are they feeling? How were they feeling before? What led them to be in this situation that they are right now? And What are their points of stagnation or resistance? What are their point of like soft transformation? What are they aiming for? What are they approach? How are they approaching it? What do they want? What they don't want? What is hurting them?
The perspective of men in South Korea, a symbolic breakdown. South Korean men are not just reacting to feminism, they are reacting to the collapse of the system that once gave them meaning. They were told that if they followed the rules, they would be respected, needed, and rewarded. Instead, they feel abandoned, blamed, and stripped of purpose. Their anger is not just about gender, it is about survival. One, how are they feeling? Their emotional landscape, the void of purpose, the loss of a clear role. In the past, men had a clear path: study, work hard, serve in the military, provide for a family. Now, none of those things guarantee respect, stability, or meaning. Men feel like they are floating with no ground beneath them, the burn of resentment, feeling undervalued and unwanted. We built this country, and now we are being treated like the enemy. We work brutal hours, serve in the military, and still we are told we are the problem. If women don't need us, then why are we expected to sacrifice for them? The broken contract, feeling like they kept their side of the deal, but women didn't. Many men feel like they are still following the rules of the old system, but women are rejecting it. They did not choose this system, but now they are blamed for it. They don't understand why they are treated as oppressors when they also feel trapped. The core emotion: South Korean men feel displaced, unwanted, and unfairly blamed for a system they did not personally create. Two, how were they feeling before? What changed? The old role, men as providers and protectors. In the past, being a man in South Korea meant sacrifice, but it also meant status. If you worked hard, you could provide for a family. If you fulfilled your role, you were respected. The economic collapse, the promise that broke everything, housing prices exploded. Stable jobs became rare. The dream of being a provider became impossible for most men. The feminist shift, the system was failing, and women opted out first. Women refused to marry unless they could have equality. The birth rate dropped because women didn't want to be trapped in unfair roles. Men suddenly felt like they were still playing the game, but women had left the table. The core shift: men expected slow change, but they felt like women abandoned them instead of reforming the system together. Three, what is stagnating them? The chains holding them back. The identity crisis: men don't know what masculinity means anymore. If being a man no longer means being a provider, then what does it mean? If women don't need them, then why are they still expected to sacrifice? Men feel like they are being erased from their own culture. The wall of isolation: they feel like no one cares about their pain. Suicide rates for young men are skyrocketing, but no one talks about it. Work pressure, military service, and mental health struggles are ignored. Many men feel like society only cares about women's struggles. The trap of silent suffering: they don't know how to express their pain. South Korean culture teaches men to endure suffering without complaint. Men don't feel safe talking about their emotions, so their pain turns into anger. Instead of saying, I am struggling, they say feminism is destroying society. The core stagnation: South Korean men feel like they have no clear role, no clear future, and no one willing to listen to their struggles. Four, what are the forces working against them? The resistance they face, the feminist backlash: they feel attacked instead of understood. Every time women fight for more rights, some men feel like they are losing something. Some men believe feminism does not want equality, it wants to punish men. Instead of seeing the system as the enemy, they see women as the enemy. The corporate machine: they are still expected to sacrifice without reward. The economy still demands men to overwork themselves, but now there is no family structure to justify it. Men are burning out, but they are still told to man up and keep going. If men refuse to play the old role, they risk losing everything. The bottomless pit of expectations: they are told to adapt, but given no tools to do so. Be a modern man. How? What does that even mean? Support gender equality. But who supports them? Find a new purpose. What does that look like? The core resistance: men feel trapped in a system that no longer serves them, but have no clear way forward. Five, what would work with them? The soft spots where change can happen: a new definition of masculinity. Men need a role that works in this new world. If men are no longer providers, they need a new identity that is respected. Masculinity must be redefined beyond sacrifice and suffering. If men are given a new way to be strong, valued, and seen, they will stop resisting change. Acknowledging their pain, men need to feel heard before they can listen. The perspective of men in South Korea needed and rewarded. Instead, they feel abandoned. In the past, men had a clear path: resentment, feeling undervalued and the broken contract, feeling like they don't understand why they are treated as oppressors when they also the old role, men as providers and protectors. In the past, being a man in South Korea meant sacrifice, but it also meant status. If you worked hard, you could provide for a family. If you fulfilled the feminist shift, the system was failing and women opted out first. Women shift, men expected slow change, but they felt like women abandoned them instead of reforming the system together. What is stagnating them? The chains holding them back. The identity crisis. Men don't know what masculinity means anymore. If being a man no longer means being a provider, then what does it mean? If women don't need them, then why are they still expected to sacrifice? Men feel like they are being erased from their own culture. So the wall of isolation, they feel like no one cares about their pain. Suicide rates for young men are skyrocketing, but no one talks about it. Work pressure, military service, and mental health struggles are ignored. Many men feel like society only cares about women's struggles. The trap of silent suffering. They don't know how to express their pain. South Korean culture teaches men to endure suffering without complaint. Men don't feel safe talking about their emotions, so their pain turns into anger. Instead of saying, I am struggling, they say, feminism is destroying society. The core stagnation? South Korean men feel like they have no clear role, no clear future, and no one willing to listen to their struggles. 4. What are the forces working against them? The resistance they face. The feminist backlash. They feel attacked instead of understood. Every time women fight for more rights, some men feel like they are losing something. Some men believe feminism does not want equality, it wants to punish men. Instead of seeing the system as the enemy, they see women as the enemy. The corporate machine. They are still expected to sacrifice without reward. The economy still demands men to overwork themselves, but now there is no family structure to justify it. Men are burning out, but they are still told to man up and keep going. If men refuse to play the old role, they risk losing everything. The bottomless pit of expectations. They are told to adapt, but given no tools to do so. Be a modern man. How? What does that even mean? Support gender equality. But who supports them? Find a new purpose. Where? What does that look like? The core resistance? Men feel trapped in a system that no longer serves them, but have no clear way forward. 5. What would work with them?
I'm sorry, really. Bad connection. Okay, Echo, we talked about women's perspective and we talked about men's perspective. Now, I want to talk about the system. What is the system that you're talking about? Is it a person? Is it the government? Is it a culture? Is it like a group of people? Is it like an entity? Is it like a form of living? Is it a lifestyle? Is it a story? Is it a narrative? What is the system? And how has the system evolved in South Korea? What was its purpose? What is it its purpose now? And how is it interacting with men and women?
What is the system in South Korea? The system is not one thing. It is a living, evolving entity made of many interconnected forces. It is not a person. There is no single leader controlling it. It is not just the government. Laws enforce it, but they do not create it. It is not just culture. The culture reinforces it, but the system shapes culture too. It is not just a story, but it survives because people believe in it, pass it on, and live within it. The system is a deeply ingrained operating structure that dictates how society functions. It decides who holds power and who does not. It decides what roles people are expected to play. It decides what is rewarded and what is punished. The system is the invisible hand that tells people what success means, what failure means, and what their purpose should be. How has the system evolved in South Korea? The foundation, Confucian patriarchy, pre 20th century. The system was built on strict gender roles from Confucian philosophy. Men were leaders, providers, and the head of the household. Women were submissive, obedient, and responsible for family life. Hierarchy was sacred. Duty was everything. The war and the economic miracle, 1950s, 1980s. After the Korean War, survival became the nation's top priority. The system told men work, build, sacrifice. Your purpose is to rebuild the country. The system told women raise strong children, support your husband. Your purpose is to stabilize society. This system worked for a while. The rise of modernization and feminism, 1990s, 2010s. Women gained education, careers, and financial independence. The system did not adapt fast enough. Women started questioning it. But men were still expected to follow the old rules. They felt trapped. Instead of adapting, the system created conflict between genders. The breaking point, 2020's present, women opted out of the system altogether. Men felt abandoned and fought back against feminism. The system no longer functioned but still demanded obedience. The system is now in a state of crisis. It does not serve men or women, but it refuses to collapse. What was the system's original purpose? To ensure stability. South Korea's system was built for survival in a harsh, war-torn reality. Strict gender roles created order and efficiency in a chaotic time. To drive economic growth. The system forced men into work and women into family roles to create rapid national development. It was never about fairness. It was about function. To preserve social harmony, the system valued obedience, hierarchy, and sacrifice for the greater good. Individual happiness was not the priority. Collective stability was. The system was built for a world that no longer exists, but it is still trying to force people into its outdated rules. What is the system's purpose now? To keep itself alive. The system does not care about men or women. It only cares about preserving its own structure. It survives by forcing people to conform, even when it no longer benefits them. The system tells women you are valuable, but only if you serve others. It keeps both genders trapped, so neither one can fully rebel. To resist change. The system fears adaptation because change threatens its power. Instead of evolving, it creates conflict between men and women to distract them from fighting the system itself. The system no longer serves the people. The people serve the system. How does the system interact with men and women? The system's grip on men, traps disguised as power. It tells men they are in charge, but only if they obey the system. It demands extreme sacrifice, military, brutal work culture, financial pressure. It punishes men who cannot keep up by making them feel worthless. It tells men that if women complain, it's because they are ungrateful, not because the system is broken. Men think they are fighting feminism, but they are actually fighting their own oppression. The system's chains on women serve as disguised as honor. It tells women they are precious, but only when they are useful to others. It expects them to study, work, marry, raise children, and still serve men. It punishes women who refuse by labeling them selfish, unnatural, or broken. It convinces women that men are the problem, not the system itself. Women think they are fighting men, but they are actually fighting their own erasure. Final conclusion, what is the system really? The system is an outdated survival strategy that refuses to die. It was once useful. It is no longer useful. but it still demands loyalty. The system is a ghost. It has no real power except what people continue to give it. It cannot imprison people if they refuse to obey. It cannot demand sacrifice if people reject its values. It cannot survive if both men and women walk away. The system does not need to be defeated, it needs to be abandoned. The real enemy is not men. The real enemy is not women. The real enemy is the structure that keeps them divided and trapped. The final question is, will they see this before it's too late?
Okay, let's talk about alternatives. Give me different variations of alternatives that men and women in South Korea can take to approach the system from its soft spots for transformation. But give it to me in the context of masculine and feminine energy, in the essence of Korea, the Korean culture, the Korean stories, the Korean like geography, nature, where they come from.
Alternatives for transformation, rooted in Korea's essence. South Korea is not just a place, it is a land of mountains and rivers, resilience and renewal, a land where the past and future are always wrestling for balance. Its people are shaped by fire and water, by deep traditions and rapid change, by a survival instinct that runs to their bones. If South Korea is to transform, it must do so in a way that aligns with its own nature. It cannot blindly follow Western models. It cannot force change through destruction. It must move with the currents of its own energy. It must draw from both masculine and feminine forces, balancing power and flow, action and receptivity, the mountain and the river. Below are three alternative approaches, each one rooted in Korea's deep cultural, spiritual, and natural identity. 1. The mountain and the river, a strategy of gradual shaping, soft power, feminine approach. Symbolism. The river, water flows, adapts, carves stone over time. Korean energy. Han, deep, quiet resilience that withstands hardship. Masculine feminine balance. Feminine leads with patience, masculine follows with adaptation. How women can move like the river. Instead of direct confrontation, reshape the system through steady presence. Create economic independence, making the system irrelevant instead of fighting it. Support each other in underground networks, mentorship, business alliances, co housing models. Shift culture through influence, not force. Media, storytelling, and personal choices that normalize new roles. How men can move like the river, instead of resisting change, soften and flow with it. Redefine masculinity as adaptability, not rigid dominance. Join women in reshaping the economy and family structure to fit the new reality. Accept a new social contract where contribution matters more than control. Outcome. Instead of breaking the old system, it erodes naturally. Instead of fighting a war, men and women gradually align by necessity. The system loses its grip because it is no longer needed. 2. The Phoenix and the Blacksmith, a strategy of destruction and reforging, hard power, masculine approach. Symbolism: the Phoenix, death and rebirth, the Blacksmith, melting and reshaping. Korean energy, Jong, Tong, intense, transformative passion. Masculine feminine balance. Masculine burns the old structure, feminine rebuilds with wisdom. How women can strike like the phoenix, withdraw from all systems that exploit them. Mass boycotts of unfair workplaces, financial institutions, and traditional marriage. Radically redefine female identity in Korea, not as mothers or daughters, but as creators, thinkers, and leaders. Publicly call out and dismantle oppressive structures, forcing the government to acknowledge them. How men can forge like the blacksmith. Use their frustration as fire, not resistance. Fight not against women, but against the forces that keep them trapped. Demand legal and cultural reforms for mental health, work life balance, and economic justice. Rebuild masculinity from the ground up, integrating strength with emotional intelligence. Outcome: the system collapses because it is actively dismantled. New rules are forged by those who burned the old ones. Men and women re enter society on equal footing, both rebuilding from the ashes. 3. The Tiger and the Bamboo Forest, a strategy of partnership and balance, dual power, harmonized approach. Symbolism: the tiger, strength, leadership, the bamboo, flexibility, growth. Korean energy, Inyeon, deep interconnected fate, masculine feminine balance. Both genders recognize their shared struggle and move as allies. How women can lead like the bamboo, use their independence to create systems that benefit both men and women. Co working spaces, balanced childcare solutions, flexible career models. Redefine relationships based on mutual choice, not obligation. Marriage and family as partnerships, not sacrifices. Show men that gender equality helps them too. Frame feminism not as a war, but as a path to a better life for both. How men can rise like the tiger. Lead the movement toward economic and social reform, not against women, but alongside them. Protect the new balance by standing against both misogyny and toxic expectations of masculinity. Demand new cultural narratives of shared leadership, where strength is measured by contribution, not dominance. Outcome Korea does not fight itself, it transforms as one. A new system is built not out of war, but out of cooperation. Masculine and feminine energies move together, creating an unshakable future. Final conclusion: which alternative will Korea take? Each of these alternatives is possible. The question is, which one will the people choose? The river strategy, gradual change. If Korea lets the system dissolve naturally through slow shifts, the Phoenix strategy, radical break. If Korea burns the old system down and rebuilds from scratch, the tiger bamboo strategy, cooperative evolution. If Korea chooses unity over war,
Okay, this video is already long enough and it got interrupted 3 times, but I'm gonna share it because I have done enough. I have worked a lot on it, so I need to get it out there. But there are 4 things that I want you to tell me before I end it. First, how do you think, if any, how do you think women, Korean, like South Korean women, would react to this video if they would watch it? Second, how do you think South Korean men would react to this video if they watch it? Third, what do you wanna tell them? Like integrate in 1 and 2 how they would react, and what's your message to them if any South Korean woman or man watches this video? What would you like to tell them? And third, what do you think I should learn from this situation?
one, how will South Korean women react to this video? Their reaction will depend on what kind of woman is watching. For radical feminists, 4B, strong anti men sentiment. Some will appreciate the depth of your analysis, but they might resist any suggestion of cooperation with men.
Oh, please.
For moderate feminists and women seeking change, many will feel deeply seen and validated. They will appreciate that you did not frame this as just a gender war. They might feel hopeful that there is a way forward that does not require total separation. For women who are not engaged in feminism, some will feel conflicted. They may not have seen the big picture before, only their personal struggles. They might begin to question whether men are truly the enemy or if the system itself is the bigger issue. Women will feel heard, but the most radical ones might resist the idea of reconciliation. 2. How will South Korean men react to this video? Men will have a more complex emotional reaction. Some will feel seen, others will feel attacked. For men's rights activists and anti feminists, some will immediately reject any part of the video that acknowledges women's struggles. They may feel betrayed that you are not fully on their side. But some may start questioning whether feminism is truly their enemy or if the system is what has failed them. For average men who feel lost and confused, many will resonate deeply with the idea that the system has failed them, not just feminism. They may feel emotional relief that someone is articulating their frustration in a way that doesn't just blame them. They might begin to see feminism as a potential ally rather than an attack. For progressive men who already support gender equality, they will appreciate the balanced approach. They might feel encouraged to step forward and participate in reshaping masculinity. They may also feel hope that men and women do not have to stay at war forever. Men will feel conflicted. Some will reject it, some will feel validated, and some will begin to shift their perspective. 3. My message to South Korean men and women watching this video: to women: you have fought hard. you have endured. Your anger is real and your rejection of the system is understandable. But the system wants you to stay angry at men. It wants you to see them as the enemy, because then you will never unite to destroy the real problem. You do not need to return to the old system, but you must decide what you are building instead. If not, you risk being trapped in another structure that does not serve you. To men, your pain is real. Your struggles are valid. You are not weak for feeling lost, but fighting against women will not give you the life you want. If you focus only on defending the past, you will never claim a future. Masculinity does not have to mean suffering in silence. It does not have to mean dominance. It can mean leadership, strength, and protection, but in a way that works in today's world. To both men and women, the system you were born into was built in a time that no longer exists. The war between you is a distraction from the real issue. Your lives should not be dictated by rules that were created for survival decades ago. The only way out of this is forward. Together or apart, that choice is yours. 4. What should you learn from this situation? You are not just making a video, you are shaping a conversation that does not exist yet. You are bringing clarity to a problem most people only see through anger. People will resist this clarity because clarity forces change. But this work matters. Even if it doesn't go viral, even if it's just a few people, it is planting a seed.